What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light and Lamp Podcast. I am here with Steve,
Hello.
as always, and a couple of housekeeping things. I'm going to apologize right off the bat if this sounds a little bit more echoey than normal. I recently moved recording spaces, and I have not had the opportunity to hang up all of the decorations and stuff on my walls just yet, which usually would dampen the sound and whatnot. So if it's a little bit echoey, I apologize. Hopefully, by the time next week's podcast rolls around, I'll have gotten around to hanging up my stuff. And there wasn't an episode last week because I'm an idiot and I completely forgot on the day we were supposed to record. And
And then I
honestly,
ended up getting sick, so it's.
it was just a really busy week for everyone. So, yeah. So that's just kind of little housekeeping stuff. We're going to start with the biggest news, what we wanted to talk about last week that we're going to talk about this week. Mr. Bradford Marchand is back at it again, and
Just called him Bradford, bro. You just turned
I
him
don't
into like a 21-year-old frat bro from like.
I don't know if that's actually his name, but I mean it just sounds funny to call him that, so I'm going to. He made some statements regarding the NHL and the NHLPA's deciding to not allow players to go over for the Olympics, and I'm going to read his statement verbatim off of his official Twitter at bmarch63, just so you know that we're not paraphrasing you. You're like, "Bro, you guys are just hating on him." And so that way, if you haven't also heard this, that you'll have a bit of context as to what the hell I'm talking about. So verbatim from his Twitter account, the NHL and NHLPA can change the rules of the CBA to add a taxi squad so they don't miss any games and don't lose any money, ellipses, which has already been agreed upon that the players will pay back in escrow until the owners are made whole from what they have lost during the pandemic, regardless of how many games are missed, ellipses. Yet they can't do a taxi squad during the Olympics, so they can honor the agreement they made so that the NHL players can go, ellipses. You can see that he was really, thinking hard, using all 6 brain cells.
He was really putting that high school level fucking English education to work.
Please tell me that's not bullshit, ellipses. And for all you who want to pipe back about forfeiting pay while being gone, ellipses, yeah, not a problem. Only 2 periods this time. Let the players make their choice. So, not only is this just a gross misrepresentation of what happened, it's also really incredibly dumb. So I guess we'll start with what was your gut reaction to this, and then we'll kind of break it down as to why this is A, it's just patently false, and B, why I'm pretty sure we both on the same wavelength, because my initial reaction was, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I mean that was my initial reaction to it. You sound dumb, bro. So one, you directly call out the NHLPA, which is the Players Association, which is your union who you elect representatives to vote on these issues. I don't understand how he could say that they didn't get a say in any of this, because that's really what this kind of boils down to, is what it feels like. It feels like it's saying oh, here are the reasons we were given and we still would have gone, but it's like that's okay if you wanted to go, but this is what the union wanted to do. It was in the best interest of everybody to do this. You know what I mean? I just feel like it was irresponsible of him more than anything to put the league, your union, the league you play in, and the owners of the franchises you all play for on blast in public like this, when, I mean, it really wasn't that contentious of an issue, I thought. I really thought everybody was kind of on the same wavelength when we had to shut the league down for an extra 5 days than they were originally allotted for during the Christmas break, and we still have games postponed. That, realistically, there's just no reason to send the top talent from our league halfway around the world, where if there's a high likelihood at this point that somebody would test positive for COVID and you'd lose everybody on that team for 5 weeks in a mandatory quarantine. What about any of that makes sense for the league, the Players Association, or the owners to want to be involved in? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's like the big thing, right? So obviously, I think the number one concern on the NHL's part is their star players being stuck for minimum 3 weeks, maximum 5 weeks. And like we've said before, overseas, away from team doctors, away from the Western healthcare system where all their
And
information is logged in and et cetera, et
not for
cetera.
nothing, like that 3 week to 5 week mandatory quarantine only affects like you in China. Like you crossing back into either Canada or the United States are going to be subject to now and probably another quarantine period of up to 7 to 10 days. So
Yeah,
realistically, the owners are taking a risk of losing their players for 4 to 6 weeks at the minimum and the maximum end of this. Like, if you're the Washington Capitals, are you really going to risk losing Alex Ovechkin for 6 weeks? Especially 6 weeks, when those 6 weeks consist of February, March, and February and March, like the busiest time of the season, you know?
yeah, and the other thing is, take into consideration, like you can say what you want about, you can say what you want about the owners, should let the players choose, but the owners are running a business, right? The NHL is a business at the end of the day. And if Ovechkin, Marchand, McDavid, McKinnon, all these guys are stuck for 4 to 6 weeks, not only, because that 4 to 6 weeks would extend past the 3 week Olympic break at that point,
Mm-hmm.
not only would that be a bad look for the NHL because your star players aren't playing, so people might not tune in, also, you might screw over individual teams. If all of these players are out, all these teams have to then deal with having a taxi squad and all that and bringing players up. Specifically, teams like the Oilers or the Penguins or you know,
I mean, even the Rangers, the Islanders would be hit kind of hard. Like,
like teams like that look like they're in a position to send multiple athletes overseas. Would be kind of in a bind. Like, okay, sure, yeah, the Sabres probably wouldn't really have much of a problem, right? But the Capitals would probably have a big problem because they'd probably be sending 3 or 4 Russians alone overseas. It's just kind of a weird thing to talk about. Just making it like and I think the reason that there's also a misrepresentation is because it's not as simple as the NHL and the NHLPA saying, okay, well, we'll have a taxi squad overseas, right? The International Olympic Committee also has to agree to that because
well,
this is
no,
the
I think he's talking about the taxi squads that the NHL added to the actual league this year. They like opened the CBA back up and put a taxi squad
well,
in for the next like remaining part of the season.
well, yeah, but he says yet they can't do a taxi squad during the Olympics so they can honor the agreement they made.
Yeah, so he can't like meaning we can't ferry players here or like wait, what? I guess I missed that part.
I guess
I
he's either implying. Okay, so I can see because I guess he's implying he can be implying one of two things here, right? Um, he could be implying that there needs to be a taxi squad for the Olympics, right? Because he says yet they can't do a taxi squad during the Olympics, so the NHL can honor the agreement they made. Or he's saying that the taxi squad players should just play in place of your superstars that go overseas, which I
Yeah, I think that's what I thought he was implying there, which also doesn't make any sense to me.
right. So if he's implying that the NHL should just do a taxi squad during the Olympics so that the players can go overseas, like in case somebody gets COVID, you bring somebody up from a taxi squad. That's not the point. So he completely misses the point here with this. Also, B, that's not something the NHLPA can just unilaterally decide. I'm assuming the IOC has some sort of part in it, and for sure the IIHF has some sort of part in that. Um, with the rules regarding roster size and stuff like that. So again, it's not like the NHL could just unilaterally just do whatever the hell they want, right? But also, that's not the point, right? The
Yeah, I
NHL
mean,
isn't worried about Team Sweden not having enough players to play. The NHL is worried about Gabriel Landeskog and Erik Karlsson being stuck in China for 6 weeks. That's what they're worried about.
yeah. I mean, I have a real problem with him saying let the players make their choice with like, yeah, I mean, your union voted.
Yeah, well, you
You,
voted
you
for these guys, right? So
like these are your representatives. Like, so you're throwing your union under the bus, but it's also like, are you implying we should let the NHL should let these players decide on an individual basis that they should, whether or not they want to go to the Olympics? That's a logistical nightmare. I mean, you're gonna tell a team that like Ovechkin can decide whether he goes or not, meaning that the team is gonna have to play without him and figure out what to do if he just decides to go, and we're just gonna keep going. Like, what is the implication here? You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that that would have worked.
especially because the NHL was if the players had gone overseas, there obviously would have been that 3 week break, right? Now that there's not the 3 week break, the NHL has decided that they're gonna make up a lot of games during that 3 week break. The
Which I mean makes
problem,
sense.
yeah, the problem with sending people overseas at this point is, again, it's not really necessarily like, oh, the NHL panicked about their schedule. They have all these back games they need to make up, so they just decided we're not going. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure the big issue here is the fact that you're sending your best players to a very population dense area of the world into an Olympic Village where, in the Tokyo Olympic Village, there was 11,000 athletes there from all over the world. Basically, with the way that COVID has infected many people across the globe, it's a guarantee with 11,000 people that somebody's there going to have it, right? Statistically speaking, to not have at least one person, at the bare minimum, have it among 11,000 athletes is
So
insanity.
yeah, it's essentially asking the NHL to take the risk, and not even the risk, just like the guarantee that like you're sending your athletes over there, and you're going to lose somebody for 3 to 5 weeks. Like one of your star athletes is going to get stuck in a quarantine hotel because there's just almost no way you're not going to get it. 11,000 athletes in the Olympic Village, like that's insane.
And, again, I don't want to bring this up because I'm not here to make a point about, like, oh, you're China, right? But it's not like it would be. This would be a very different situation if the Olympics are being held in, like, Vancouver or, like, Toronto. You know what I'm saying? Because you'd be quarantining in the country that you're then just, you come out of quarantine, you can immediately play hockey again, right? As opposed to, like, what you said, where you come out of quarantine in China, you have to fly back and then quarantine again. And quite honestly, I just don't think the NHL is very comfortable with the idea of some of their athletes being stuck in a foreign country for 6 weeks. Like, because who's to say what happens during those 6 weeks? You know what I'm saying? It's not, again, like my point earlier, it's not like you have your it's not like your primary care physician is gonna fly over to Beijing with you. You
Yeah,
know,
no.
it's sketchy and it's just dangerous in a lot of different ways, and it really has nothing to do with China as a country. It's just the situation that the world is in right now. You know, um, obviously there's a whole, like, geopolitical debate when it comes to the Chinese part of it. We're gonna stay out of that part, but the reality of the situation is this would be a different situation if the Olympics were being held in Canada or the United States. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
I mean, like, yeah, I think we'd be having this conversation even if the Olympics were being held in Europe somewhere. Like this, the reality is like the NHL doesn't want to lose its star players to just any foreign country for an undetermined amount of time. You know?
Oh yeah, certainly. And the other thing that this really kind of bothers me is you are a player under contract to the Boston Bruins. You signed a contract with the Boston Bruins of the National Hockey League, a pretty good contract. You're getting paid $6 million, more than most people will get paid in their lifetime. And you're mad that you're being held to the stipulations that were in that contract that you willingly signed. Now, granted, look, when Brad Marchand signed his contract in 2016, he had no idea that there's going to be a global pandemic in 4 years, right? Nobody knew. But you're a contracted athlete. This is your job. And when your job comes to you and says, listen, these are the rules, especially when the rules have been approved by a governing body that you elected, you can't really be all that mad about it. Like, this to me very much screams of like an entitled, privileged athlete being mad that the people he elected are holding him to the contract that he signed. I mean, yes, obviously I understand he wants to go overseas, he wants to represent Canada. The Olympics are a very, very special thing to these athletes. I totally understand all of that. But we are not living in a normal world. Okay, this is not the 20. What was the last Winter Olympics when they didn't go? It was 2018? 2016? Yes, this is not like. They didn't go to 2016, I don't think, because they had the World Cup, right?
Yeah, no, they didn't go.
So this is not the 2016 Olympics where there's, really the biggest reason the NHL didn't go over there that season was just because of them wanting to recoup money for themselves. This is a very, very different situation. If there was no global pandemic and there really was no reason to not send people overseas, I could understand him having an argument there. That's not the world we're living in.
It's not. I mean, it's just not a like. It's just not feasible. Like, it really isn't. In what world, in what business are you going to lose your top earners to like a nebulous situation just for the hell of it? Like, the NHL is going to lose so much money to do it. Like, why are they like? They in a normal world they'd be willing to lose that money because they'd be able to recoup it. Like, it'd be fine. But like in a world where the situation is as fluid as it is, the NHL needs to get in as many games now as they can, and they can't afford to lose their star athletes to the Olympics. Like, they just can't. I mean,
Yeah.
what's to say in 3 months that the NHL isn't going on another like 2 week break because they have to postpone a lot of games? Like, you never know. So like the NHL doesn't want to be held like, oh shit, like not only do we have to keep playing now, so now we have to figure out what to do to fill all these rosters and keep teams under the salary cap or whatever, you know? Like it's just too nebulous for the NHL to be willing to lose all this money right now and be willing to risk it.
Yeah, and again, it's just this is not a normal year. It's not been a normal 2.5 years, basically. So you really can't like apply normal logic to like what's going on. You have to be realistic and say, no, we're still living in the middle of a global pandemic. So it's just a lot of like nonsense, I think, from Brad Marchand here, and then hopefully somebody like sits him down and is like, let's look, dude, like you gotta chill, bro.
I
You're
mean,
not making any sense.
what's also weird about this is like either right before he made these comments or shortly thereafter, the IIHF canceled the World Juniors. Like,
Yeah.
so when we're living in a world where they're literally canceling the whole tournament, why would the NHL risk it? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to paint like the IIHF as like this, because they've also had their fair share of controversy. I guess we can kind of transition to that when they canceled the women's world tournament before they canceled the World Juniors, and
I
like
mean, the
that
women
was a
hadn't even
whole other
played a
thing.
single game. Yeah.
It's like that was a whole other issue there where there was very inconsistent rulings between those two. So it really just kind of seems like nobody really at this current moment in time kind of knows what's going on.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely not.
So we'll transition into something I just wanted to make note of, an event that happened, a little bit more of a positive story that's come out of the NHL recently with all the negativity that's been going on. Um, I'm sure most people at this point, or actually, I won't even say that because I'm sure some of you have heard at this point about the interaction that the Vancouver Canucks equipment manager had with the Seattle Kraken fan. The story goes that during the Kraken's first home game on October 23rd, let me grab his name here. Brian Hamilton, who's one of the Vancouver Canucks equipment managers, was clearing off the bench, and and there was a woman who was like banging at the glass, who was like trying to get his attention. Um, and he kind of like just brushed her off, just didn't really pay attention. And then eventually he like, she was like really persistent, like just kept banging on the glass. So he turned it around. He turned around, and the woman told him that she saw a mole on the back of his neck, and she said, "That's cancer. You need to get that looked at like immediately." Um, he said he kind of just blew it off at first, didn't really think much of it, but he did get it checked out, and turns out she was right. He had early stage melanoma, which I don't really know if they said or not if he got it removed. I think they were able to remove it before it spread. The woman's name, if I can grab her name here so we can give her proper due. I'm gonna butcher your last name. I'm sorry, but Nadia Popovici, she's actually a medical student, and I guess luckily for Brian, I guess she had taken that class on biology to recognize signs of cancer, and yeah, I mean she saved his life, and the Vancouver Canucks and Seattle Kraken teamed up together and awarded her $10,000 as a scholarship towards her medical school. And it's just crazy to think that because I mean to be honest with you, most people wouldn't have noticed that, right? And then B, probably would have felt too awkward to say anything about it. But
I mean, yeah, I mean, approaching a total stranger to tell them they have cancer is kind of like weird. So it's just like props to her for even just trying to talk to him about it, you know?
and the story goes that she was not letting go. Like she was persistent. Oh yeah, it says here that he had malignant melanoma and has it removed. So Brian's all good now. But apparently she just wouldn't let go of banging on the glass to get his attention. So really good for her, right? Literally saved a man's life.
Yeah.
Just so happened to be there at a hockey game at the right moment, right time. So I just wanted to bring that story up just because it's one of these, in a time where there's so much shit going wrong, to have something positive like that really it's something we all kind of need to hear from now and then, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So good for her. Good. I'm glad that everything's all good with Brian, and honestly we need more people in the world like her. So did you I guess we'll talk about the Winter Classic. I'm assuming, did you watch the Winter Classic at all?
I watched some of it. I turned it off when it was, I think, 4-1 or whatever it was before Minnesota decided to climb back into it. And so I was just watching on social media, the game's score just get run up. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest with you. I think this is one of the better Winter Classics we've had in a while, just in terms of presentation. Um, I thought the presentation was fantastic. I thought the venue was fantastic. I mean, the temperature, the aesthetics, everything fit a Winter Classic. It ended up being a pretty good game, 6-4. I do want to ask your opinion on the NHL holding the Winter Classic on a day that was filled with so many other games, and then also running concurrently with other games, like one of them being a Maple Leafs Senators game. Do you think that there's anything because some people on social media were saying why would you put the Blues Wild Winter Classic at the same time as a Maple Leafs game? You know what I'm saying? I just want to get your thoughts and opinions. Do you care at all? Do you think there's anything to that?
Well, I mean, this year it's just because they had to make up those games. A lot of times they have more time in the schedule to give everybody this day off for the Winter Classic, because usually it is by itself on New Year's Day. But this year, like you said earlier, we're not living in a normal world. So the NHL has to fit games in wherever it can in order to guarantee that they get their 82 games in, you know? So scheduling other games on the same day, it is what it is. I mean, the Rangers played on I'm pretty sure they played. Oh no, they played New Year's Eve. I'm sorry, they played New Year's Eve and then on the following Sunday. But yeah, there were games all day. And what the Winter Classic came on at 7, right?
Yeah.
Came on It's also usually earlier in the day, isn't it? Isn't it usually like a 12 or 1 o'clock game?
Yeah, 12-1, something around there. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that it was being brought up. I mean, yeah, sure. Uh, it kind of sucks to have the Winter Classic running as the same time as a Maple Leafs game specifically because everyone knows all the Maple Leafs fans are just going to watch that game. But it was only a Maple Leafs Senators game. No offense to the Ottawa Senators, but it's not like it was a Leafs like Bruins game or anything. Um, it was just kind of interesting little thing that was brought
Eh,
up. I think people made a bigger deal of it than it actually is, though.
Yeah, I really didn't think it was an issue. I was like, I mean, yeah, if the Winter Classic's on and your favorite team is playing, like, just watch your favorite team, bro. Like it's not a big deal, you know. It's not like it's the first Winter Classic ever. This is what, like the 10th one?
Something like that, yeah.
Oh no, it's I
They
think it's 12.
they have
2008 was the first one.
they haven't announced where they're going next year yet, have they?
I don't think so. They might have, but I don't know. I actually thought this year was actually like better, one of the better looking Winter Classics too, like in terms of the jerseys on the ice.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at the history of NHL Winter Classics, see if we can pull up a list here.
I mean, what's it called? Minnesota's was kind of weird with like the shape of like the state logo, like the actual shape of the state, but I mean it is what it is. I mean St. Louis couldn't go wrong with like just wearing their throwbacks in like an off-white color. It was clean.
I guess, but yeah, because we had Penguin Sabres was the first one in 2008.
Yep.
Wings Blackhawks, Flyers Bruins, Capitals Penguins, Rangers Flyers, Leafs Wings, Blackhawks Capitals, which that was a weird one. Um, Canadians Bruins, Blackhawks Blues, Rangers Sabres, Bruins Blackhawks, Predators Stars, and then this year St. Louis and Minnesota. Um, I thought that this was pretty. I thought it was pretty good. I think compared to some of the other ones we've seen. I mean, I don't want to like talk down on like anybody's Winter Classic, or whatever, but I mean, compared to some of the others we've seen in terms of presentation, I think this is one of the better ones. I mean, Predator Stars was kind of weird being held in the middle of Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, it was like 65 degrees out.
I thought that was kind of strange. Blackhawks Blues was all right. In St. Louis, the one in St. Louis, but
I mean, here's how I'm looking at it, right? This is like at least been, again, not to put down other teams' Winter Classics, especially if you're a team that's only got one so far, but like this has at least been a memorable one. Like we're at least talking about it like 3 or 4 days later, you know? I feel like last year's Winter Classic was really forgettable. I feel like there have been a lot of really forgettable ones, and at least this one's ranking among the ones that like it's at least fun to talk about. Like the presentation was good enough to remember, like the game itself ended up being good enough to remember, you know. It made sense. Like these are two teams who are actually like competing for playoff spots with one another. So like it was actually ended up being like a good one.
I think not to like be long, but for hockey's winter sport, I feel like we should probably reserve the Winter Classic for like northern or like colder climates, and give like the Stadium Series to like the other climates. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
just because like the Winter Classic is very much to me like a standalone like event as opposed to Stadium Series, which had like a billion different Stadium Series games. Um,
I mean, there's like three every year.
yeah,
And I think the other thing is, I mean, the Heritage Classic is only held in Canada. So like why can't the Winter Classic only be like northeastern teams, like teams where it actually gets cold to play, you know? And like you said, like they just leave the Stadium Series to teams where it's warm because guess what? A lot of the stadiums are in warm weather states.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely like an opportunity for some cooler venues. I thought when they played at in Michigan Stadium, the Leafs Red Wings, that was a really really cool venue to hold it in.
Oh, the big house, yeah.
Yeah, which
I mean, they played at Soldier Field, which was pretty cool. Yeah, they played at Soldier Field and Wrigley Field, which is pretty cool.
Notre Dame Stadium was pretty neat, but
Yankee Stadium was pretty cool. Oh no, that was at
that
City
was the
Field.
Stadium Series.
Yeah,
Was
yeah, yeah. City Field was the Winter Classic.
yeah, the Islanders and the Rangers played in that Stadium Series game at Yankee Stadium,
Yeah,
which is funny. So the Blackhawks have appeared in the most Winter Classics, obviously with four, and they haven't won any of them.
yeah. I mean, it's like them, the Bruins, and the Penguins have all been in like the most. Like, I don't get why. There have been a lot of really weird matchups with the Winter Classic. Like the first one, Buffalo and Pittsburgh was weird. I mean, Rangers and Buffalo was weird too. Like, I know they're both in the same state, but like, they're
It would
not.
make
Like,
more
there's no.
sense. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Honestly, there's just like no geographic rivalry between like New York teams and Buffalo teams. Like,
It
we
would make
don't
more
give a
sense
shit
to have
about one
like
another.
Buffalo Toronto or like Rangers Islanders in a Winter Classic, but they did the Rangers Islanders in the Stadium Series.
Yeah, but like, what the hell? Why not do the Rangers Islanders again, or like bring do a Ranger Bruin Winter Classic? You know, like if you
So,
really want it.
what do you think is your what's your favorite Winter Classic they've done?
I mean, my favorite. I mean, I'm partial. Like my favorite one might be the first one the Rangers were in.
I
That
was
was just
gonna
ended up being like
say
a fun game. Like that was a really good ass game.
the Philly Rangers one. I think is the one that stands out the most to me because it was a dramatic game. First of all, both of the jerseys looked really really good. Um,
Like you said, it was dramatic. The Rangers made a 3 goal comeback. Like they scored 3 unanswered goals to win the game. There
there was
was a
a
penalty
penalty
shot.
shot with like 6 seconds left in the third period.
Like it was something, man. And both teams were good. Like both teams were in the playoffs that year, so they were both like in the hunt at that point. So it was a competitive game. And I mean, the other games they've played, like the rivalry games or like the quote unquote rivalry games that they've tried to set up, really just don't work. I mean, like Dashville, yeah.
Dashville.
Nashville, Dallas, just like, yeah, they're in the same division. There's like, I guess, some kind of geographic rivalry between Tennessee and Texas, but like, is there? Like, do the Texas Rangers hate like I mean, there isn't a Nashville counterpart in baseball, but you get what I'm saying? Like, do the Dallas Cowboys hate the Titans? Like, I don't, is that a thing? They're not even in the same division. Like, I don't know. So like that one was weird, but like, and the other ones, like the other rivalry games, have been teams like at two different points in like their competitive arcs almost. Like it's either one team is like super highly competitive and the other team just isn't there yet, like the Blackhawks and the Red Wings the only time. I mean, that was the Red Wings team on its way to a second Stanley Cup final in a row, and that was a Blackhawks team just finishing its rebuild. So like, yeah, it's exciting, like Blackhawks, uh, Red Wings, but it's like, but the Red Wings won, and we all knew they were gonna win. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's been some oddballs in there for sure. Um,
You know what I miss the most about the Winter Classic, the old Winter Classics they don't do anymore? Do you remember when they used to televise the alumni games the day before?
yeah, I don't know why they don't do that anymore.
I don't think they hold I mean, this year's like obviously for reasons, but like I don't think in the last couple of years they've held alumni games, and I was like, man, I mean, also like the teams that they're playing with now don't really have the history to pull on like deep alumni teams, I guess. I mean, like Dallas could bring back like Mike Madan. I don't know that they could bring back Minnesota North Stars. I mean, what the hell? They wear a North Stars jersey as their alternate now. Like, could have like Mike Modano, like Dino Ciccarelli. You could have all these great dudes on the ice. Like, I don't know why they don't do them anymore. It'd be fun. I mean, Nashville wouldn't have had a team, but like, what the hell? Why not? You could have had like Ole Jokinen come out and play in an old timers game. I don't know.
I think they should do the alumni game. I think that would be that. I think they should continue that. Like obviously when it's safe
I mean,
to
could you
do so.
imagine this year's alumni game? Just say like the Minnesota Wild, because it doesn't have like a long history as the Wild. They like extended it to like Minnesota team alumni, so you got like North Stars players. That would have been lit. You could have like like I said, Mike Modano, Dino Ciccarelli, but then you also could have had like Marian Gaborik. Like he would have went out and played. He just retired. And then on the St. Louis side, I mean that runs deep, bro. You could have got Brett Hull on the ice. I
Oh
mean,
no. You'd have to get him sober first.
He's gonna get on the ice all, we went
Yeah,
Blues,
you'd have to sober
like,
that motherfucker up real fast.
yeah, you could add him Oates, you could reunite Hall and Oates, and it would probably look a lot like the real life counterpart, Hall and Oates. He'd be like middle aged and fat, so hey, perfect, be awesome. I mean,
Yeah,
dude, they got Bernie Perrant in the net, and that man was like ancient, like it was awesome. He faced two shots. They threw softballs at him. He played a minute and a half, and he got out. But it was lit. I mean, you can't tell me all those Flyer fans weren't excited to see Bernie fucking Perrant get on the ice. You know?
I think it would be pretty interesting. I think it'd be kind of cool if you could do like maybe you have some teams that are like if your next Winter Classic is two teams that don't have like the depth right of like the rosters. I think it'd be pretty interesting if you could throw together like you make a mix of like veterans and like some of the current players, right? Like so you have like obviously the
Yeah, like
Penguins
a
have like
charity
a
game.
wealth of like depth or anything, but it'd be kind of cool to see like Sidney Crosby passing the puck to Mario Lemieux. Like
Yeah.
that'd be a pretty dope three. Like you set up like 3-on-3, it's like wide open. Dudes are just skating around like 4-on-4. So it's like more wide open.
Yeah,
You
it's
get
just a skate. Like you're not looking for a competitive game. You're just looking to get these guys on the ice and skating around. Like do it for charity. I mean, they didn't even do them for the Heritage Classic. I don't think anymore. Because I remember the first Heritage Classic they had one because Mark Messier, who was still an active player, took a leave from the Rangers to play in the Oilers alumni game with his '80s teammates who were all retired. He was like, as an old timer game, shit, I'm still playing, but I'll play. Like, but I mean, like, could you imagine when you had like when the Jets played in the Heritage Classic, you could have had like Dale Howard-Chuck, obviously before he passed, but like you could have Dale Howard-Chuck, you could have had like Timu Solani, like I don't know. I just feel like the Heritage game, that not the Heritage games, the alumni games attached to these like bigger events were probably some of my favorite parts, honestly, and we don't get them anymore.
and then even the ones we towards the end when they were still doing, they weren't really televising them as much.
Yeah, no, you had to go like hunting for them to find like some cracked live stream for it because like only local broadcasts were picking it up towards the end.
Yeah, if you're NHL, if you're listening, bring back the alumni games. Me and Sam
Yeah,
are
it was fun.
big
I
proponents
mean,
of that.
obviously not for every game because then it's like for every Stadium Series game and all that stuff, you'd have to
Well,
block
yeah,
out like
no.
3 days. But like, yo, the Winter Classic's an event. You already block out like 3 days for these teams to be there. Like, make it an event. Like, make it a 3-day event. Add something on Saturday to make a Sunday like a bigger deal.
And you could also do like just completely like lost my train of thought. I don't know. Just completely blew it. Anyway,
I hate when that happens.
um, do you have anything you want to talk about before we kind of wrap up? A little bit of a shorter episode, just because like not as much news has been going on besides things you've talked about. Postponements. The cross-border games are postponed. Just the
COVID,
whole.
yeah, COVID like protocol stuff. I mean, yeah, and I mean, no team is really making a lot of noise right now because like,
Well,
I mean,
everything's
the
so
whole
like start and go. It's
well,
like
that's what I'm saying. Like, no team can get like on a run to like do something crazy that we could talk about because they might win 3 games in a row and then have like a 2 week break
I
and not
mean,
play again. So it's like, all right, well, there goes that.
like for what it's worth, better pull up the schedule here. The Islanders, I believe, one, two. Let's see if I go back. They were on. No,
They're like a 5 or 6 game winning streak.
they didn't get a point in that one. So then they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They have points in 9 of their last 11 games, right? So they're starting to pick it back up after their horrendous start. And when I check the standings, I think that they're only like
I think they're like 8 points back of the Red Wings now or something like that.
they are 8 points back of the Boston Bruins, right? So very well within grasp of a wild card spot. But then you look at the schedule, and it's like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't play. They played on Saturday on the 1st. They don't play again until the 13th. So it's
Yeah,
like
and
all that
and
momentum is just like right out
and
the door.
and the other thing about the Islanders that sucks for the Islanders, like which makes it hard to talk about, it's like they're moving in the standings, but not enough because the teams ahead of them are still winning. You know what I mean? So
And
like they're
still playing
jumping from
games.
yeah, so like they're jumping out of the basements. Like yeah, they're ahead of Buffalo now. They're ahead of like the worst teams, but like they're still haven't managed to claw themselves into the playoff picture and make like a huge jump where it's like, oh yeah, there they are. They did it. Here they, we can talk about this.
And like granted, part of that is again just because they're not playing as much. Like
Well, yeah,
they're tied in games played with the Bruins, but every other team ahead of them in the standings right now has played more games than them. Like the two teams that are ahead of them in a wild card, right? The Penguins have 41 points in 31 games. The Bruins 34 and 28. The Islanders have only played 28, right? So it's like it's hard to make comparisons like, oh, how close are the Islanders to a wild card spot? It's like, well, we don't know because they're not going to play another game for 12 days
yeah,
because
and they played third like they have like 4 games in hand on some of these teams. So
or it's like how close are the Dallas Stars to wild cards? Like, well, I don't know because they just had 10 players on their COVID protocol list like 2 days ago.
yeah, and they got postponed again. So like who knows?
It's just kind of a rough it's hard to make comparisons. Like we're gonna try have to do our halfway episode at some point, but some teams by that point, like the Islanders, by the time other teams are hitting 41, the Islanders, the Stars, they probably only gonna play like 35 games. But
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
gonna be tough, but like we're gonna have to do something, right?
um,
I
I
guess the other
guess.
thing like
Well, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying like it's hard to talk about the other teams too because like the only team that's been like on a tailspin recently has been the Oilers, and they've been better as of late. So it's like it's not still not newsworthy, you know?
I guess we'll end it here, even though it's late because New Year's was 2 days ago. Um, I'll pick a team from the East and give them a New Year's resolution. I'll pick a team from the West, um, and give them
Hmm.
a New Year's resolution. And I'm gonna pick the. I'm gonna pick. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna take two teams because they have very similar New Year's resolutions. For the end of this season, the New Year's resolution for the Edmonton Oilers and the Minnesota Wild is absolutely 100% without a doubt do something in the playoffs. Look, it's not just good enough to get in the playoffs anymore, quite honestly, for these two teams because, okay, sure. But for two different reasons, right? You expect the Edmonton Oilers to be in the playoffs every year. Realistically speaking, with players like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, there's no reason why they shouldn't, except for the fact that they don't want to invest in any other part of the team besides the offense for some reason. But it's nobody cares that the Edmonton Oilers are making the playoffs. Nobody cares. You have to start doing something and making some noise in the playoffs because, quite frankly, it's not just good enough to be in the first round anymore. We expect you to be there. And conversely, on the side of the Minnesota Wild, okay, yeah, maybe you're not as automatic a lock for the playoffs as, say, the Edmonton Oilers, but you're also not in as fortuitous a position as some other teams are in terms of your age, right? Because, okay, sure, a lot of your younger players, your quote unquote younger players are starting to step up. I don't know what that noise was; just scared the hell out of me. Oh, it was the Minnesota Wild website. That's what it was. Jesus. I apologize. The Minnesota Wild website has some stupid IM messenger bullcrap. Um, yeah, okay, you have your Kirill Kaprizov, who's 24. Matt Dumble's only 27, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But some of the other players on this team are starting to hit that age where you're not going to be getting that many good years out of them in the next 2 to 3 years, right? They're starting to hit that point where they're a little bit older. Um, guys like Matt Zuccarello, who's already 35 or 34. Marcus Foligno was 30, so he's in his prime right now. Um, Somebody like Jonas Brodin, who's 28, he's in his prime right now. If you keep just like doing the thing that the Wild always do, which is make the playoffs and then get slammed in the first round, 3 years from now, this team is not going to look as good as it did now because you're going to be like, oh, holy crap, like all of a sudden, Kirill Kaprizov is 27. Okay, he's in his prime now. Now we got to start competing. Oh, where's our other players like, the guys that we came to rely on over the years, like Nick Bukestad. It's like, oh, he's already like 32, 33, right?
Yeah.
the time is now for this team, and not like saying, oh, in 3 years they're going to be terrible. But if in 3 years you haven't made it past the first round, there's nothing to build on. If in 3 years from now the Wild have made the first round this year, then the second round next year, then the Western Conference Finals the year after, you're like, okay, this team is ready now to start winning a Stanley Cup. If 3 years from now they haven't made it past the first round again, who cares? What's the point? You know what I'm saying? And the same for the Oilers. But the Oilers, luckily for them, a lot of their players are on the younger side. But still, I mean, what's the point? Who cares? No, I don't care that the Edmonton Oilers make the playoffs. So,
Yeah, it's like tell me when they actually do something in the playoffs.
So my resolution for the Wild and the Oilers is do something to make me believe that you're not just gonna do the things that you always do, which is make the first or second round and then completely fizzle out.
Mine is for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's not even on the page. Just get by the first round. Just get to the second round. That's it. That's all I want. Like, this team is too good to keep fizzling out in the first fucking round, especially last year when they lost to the Montreal Canadiens. Like, there's no reason this team did not go further than it did.
When they were up 3-1.
Yeah.
Just kind of pathetic. I guess it's the same thing, right? Like, nobody cares that the Maple Leafs are going to make the playoffs. Like,
it's just like you went out and you did the right thing. You rebuilt. You got all this high-end talent. Now do something with it. Like, sure, you can win 21 games, 21 of your first 31 games, but like, what does that mean in June when you're out in 4?
ultimately nothing. Like,
Right, exactly. Like, you played 82 games to play 4 extra games and then go home a week later or 2 weeks later than the rest of the rest of the league that didn't make it.
I'm starting to see like the regular season doesn't really mean all that much because ultimately, does anybody really remember specific teams that like did super well in the regular season, or do you really remember the teams that did well in the postseason? Like, when you ask, you know, like I'll bring up the Rangers for instance, right? When you talk to Rangers fans about like the most memorable teams that the team has, what's the one that always is number one, right?
Oh, 94, bro.
Is the 94 Rangers, right? When realistically speaking, the 70s Rangers probably had just as much, if not more, of a sustained period of success, but
They didn't win a Stanley
nobody
Cup.
cares. Well, not that nobody cares. Obviously, it's some legendary players, but ultimately, the team that won and maybe didn't have as much sustained success after that overtook them. Why? Because they did what the 70s Rangers couldn't do. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, they won. You remember the winners. That's really what it comes down to. Like, or at least the team that like we're gonna talk about that last year's Montreal team for like probably a while because like who expected the Montreal Canadiens to go as far as they did? You know, I
yeah.
don't think anybody did. But like that's an off chance. Usually we only talk about like the Stanley Cup winners or the Stanley Cup finals themselves.
Well, like, if Ovechkin didn't win a cup in 2018, would anybody really care how much playoff success or how much regular season success they had? Like, nobody even really cares now because the Capitals still have gotten past the second round exactly once during his tenure. Once. Everyone seems to forget that because that one run in 2018 kind of washed away all that negativity. Ultimately, this is a team that has severely underperformed. But winning a Stanley Cup cures a lot of wounds. So,
It seemingly heals all wounds for a fan base.
I mean, we just, as hockey fans, we need more Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner in the playoffs. I mean, that's just it, right? Like, I want to watch these guys more than just 4 games or 7 games in the first round.
Bro, I don't even want to watch them in the first those 4 games in the first round because they're gonna get stomped on by the Boston Bruins probably. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's like same thing with the Oilers. Like when the Oilers in the play-in round 2 years ago when they played
Oh
against
my
the
God.
Chicago Blackhawks, it was like, why am I watching this? This looks like a amateur game. Like these teams look terrible. So it's like, yeah, I could do with more of these guys in the playoffs, but like actually show up to play. You know, like give a shit for once. Like especially on the part of the Toronto Maple Leafs, because it just seems like they don't care, you know? whenever you look at their bench, they're always kind of just like staring, not really doing anything, and they could be like lit up like 6-1. They don't care. They're like whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like I just want to actually see them care and do something in the playoffs. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Like, again, I,
it's hard to say that they don't care, but it's like show us that you care as much as you say that you do, and actually do the thing.
I
You
just
know,
think, like, as somebody who doesn't really hold particularly any cards in whether or not the Oilers do well in the playoffs, I want to watch these like high level players more than just like for one round, you know?
I mean, realistically, like Connor McDavid's the best player in the league. Why wouldn't you want to see more of him? You know, like these are the brightest, like the youngest, brightest stars that the league has to offer, and it's like they just get stomped on every year. It's like, bro, please, like, why? It's just really frustrating, honestly. And I can only imagine what it's like to be an Oiler fan or a Maple Leaf fan at this point,
Oh yeah.
especially a Leaf fan. You're probably pulling your hair out because it's like after like those 10 years of being absolute dog shit, they're now like actually good, but like not good enough. Like it's like the most Maple Leaf thing you can do, right? Like you're just like garbage. You have no expectations. You build a little bit of an expectation by getting into the playoffs that first round, that first year, and pushing the Washington Capitals to the 7 games and being like, all right, this Austin Matthews kid's pretty good, and then just never build on that. Just never get any higher. Just maintain. It's like, oh, at least
So
like the Ranger team, like those Ranger teams, like weren't good, but it was exciting because like they at least went somewhere. You know what I mean? Like they made progress.
yeah, it's like we're seeing them taking steps forward where it seems like the Leafs and the Oilers and the Wild, back when the Wild were in the playoffs consistently, kind of just put it in park, and we're like, well, it's basically like they got onto the freeway and then just immediately put it in park in the right lane. They were like, oh, we got on the expressway. It's like, yeah, you didn't get anywhere, dude. Like,
It's like getting on the expressway to get off at the next exit. Like literally the first exit you encounter. It's like, oh, well, that got you like a quarter of a mile. But what was the point? Why'd you waste all the time to get there if you weren't going to actually use it?
yeah. So there you have it. Some resolutions for you teams. And yeah, next week, hopefully we'll have some more news to talk about, and maybe some more on ice analysis. We've been doing a lot of like news stuff lately, just because quite honestly, that's just been the predominant story in the NHL with so many teams being stop and start, and it's hard to really talk about stuff. So um, we'll keep an eye on things, as you guys know, and hopefully next week we'll have some on ice stuff to talk about, and I'm sure we'll have some news because hey, it's the NHL. There's always news. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys again next time.